have with us today one of the people in India that shapes the urban agenda. And as you know, Prime Minister Modi has made smart cities one of the hallmarks of his administration, with over 98, right, smart cities, 100, a full 100, with over $30 billion of projects in motion already. This was a very audacious goal from the Prime Minister. You had a big role in it. How's it going? Are you making progress? Is this on track? And what's slowing things down, if it's being slowed down?
That's a good question to start with. What's going on? So we have 100 cities, and already we have close to about $9 billion worth of projects which are grounded in the process of being tendered out. And we're looking at, I think, more than just building the brick and mortar infrastructure and projects. What is really significant is the way that we are transforming the way in which cities can develop. So there's a smartness that's come into project preparation, project planning, project finance. There are 7 cities that have launched municipal bonds, which is quite an achievement for the sector. So overall, we're looking at what Prime Minister Modi has referred to as the urban transformation, and the smart cities are what we call lighthouses that will produce the models and good practices that can then be replicated and scaled up across the urban sector, which is very, very crowded because we have more than 4,000 cities. So it's going well as far as we can see. There is a lot of press that questions, hey, where are the smart cities? But smart cities are not going to be built overnight. And we are really looking at setting the paradigm for a more sustained transformation of our cities, which have been neglected for 70 years. So we have to keep that background in mind. I think it's looking good. In terms of barriers, there are a couple. One big one is capacity. We need to train our administrators, our engineers, planners, as well as be able to harness the kind of innovation that can come from the private sector and business, and also academia, so that the development of our cities is not simply a silo occupied by government, which is only building brick and mortar infrastructure, but it's really about a more holistic approach. And in that as well, I think we're making some good moves on that. The second big barrier, of course, is that the government of India alone will not be able to finance all of the kinds of development of infrastructure and services that we require. So one of the weaknesses of the urban sector is public-private partnership, and we need to develop good, successful models of being able to harness private investment in cities. And the two things are dovetailed, actually. If we are able to plan better, we can de-risk the investment, or at least reduce the risk in the investment, so that then the private sector feels more comfortable investing in cities. So overall, as I see it, it's a transformation, and transformations are not easy to pin down, but we can clearly see it, and there are a number of different indicators that tell us that it's actually happening.
So do you feel like an urban entrepreneur that you have to learn from your failures and move quickly and agility?
Yeah, sure. I think we have to learn from failures. One of the key learnings we have from previous urban initiatives is that you got to plan very well. You got to invest in planning. And you have to make sure that planning and decision making is based on data and evidence. It can't be whimsical. It can't be based only on political decision making. It has to be linked with both ground conditions, or derived from ground conditions, and be linked with outcomes that we want to achieve. And in this regard, of course, I think we have launched this urban transformation at the right time in our history, because globally the importance of cities is now highlighted, and there is a sustainable development goals agenda as well as the new urban agenda, and I think we've aligned ourselves with that, whether it's regard to renewable energy, or making sure that affordable housing and transportation are linked together, or making sure that entrepreneurship is nurtured in our cities, because these have to be economic entities, and cities are for people.
So we host a big Smart Cities Exposition in New York City coming up this May, the logos up above here. But you'll notice on the logo it says Smart Cities Powered by People. And so one of the big issues for us has been, how do you engage people in the creation of a smart city? How do you be sure they get the things they need versus the things that maybe the mayor thinks they need, or the governor and state of, in this case. So talk to me a little bit about how are you getting data and people matched up together and helping design where cities head?
So the Smart City mission was also a game changer in the way in which it was actually launched. I don't know how many people in this room know that unlike other kinds of government programs, these 100 cities were not, and the projects being executed by cities were not selected by the governments. They were actually identified through an extensive citizen engagement process. More than 3.5 million people across these 100 cities actually contributed to selecting what their cities need, what are the strengths of their local economy, and what are the challenges of their own cities. So we started on a good note in terms of citizen engagement. Over the last 2 years, it's really been only 2 years, so that's, it's always good to remind ourselves. Over the last 2 years, the engagement has moved into empowering the local representatives with the right orientation towards what we're doing in the smart cities. That was really important. So we now have local elected representatives, municipal councillors, as well as legislators and members of parliament, completely aligned with the vision of this urban transformation and really beginning to understand why we're doing things the way we are doing it. We are looking now at, in this year, in 2019, to going back to the people once these substantial projects are grounded and say, well, here's how your life is going to be affected by it. So, a short answer to your question is, citizen engagement, people are at the center of the Smart Cities mission.
Good. So I applaud you on that. Helsinki has a strategic plan for Helsinki which says the most functional city in the world. And one of the neighborhoods, called Kalalastama, said that they would do a project of eliminating 1 hour of wasted time a day in every citizen's life. So this is a very practical way of taking the SDGs, which are up here and are very good about clean air and economic equality, et cetera, turning it into something that people feel every day. I waited less time for the bus. I got to go to the I didn't have to go to the doctor's office. I did it on a smartphone. So do you see cities in India sort of engaging their citizens and saying, tell me how to get an hour of wasted time out of my day? I could pick 1 hour in Delhi that I'd like to get out of my day, which would be the trip in from the airport. So you build a metro system, I realize, to make that faster. But talk about engaging citizens right down to the level of an hour a day.
I think, Jerry, your question stems from still, it's a top-down question, engaging citizens. What is heartening about what's happened over the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years in India is that the learning curve has been so steep that society has woken up to the importance of urban development itself. So today, citizens aren't leaving it to their governments to engage with them, they're demanding engagement. And of course, a great example is what's happening in Delhi right now with regard to air pollution. But not only in Delhi. I mean, even the air in Bombay on certain days is worse than Delhi. And every city in the country is being affected by environmental externalities. And the citizens are awake to the fact that this is one of the outcomes of either poor planning or poor project development and so on and so forth. So, there is literally a groundswell of public opinion and public engagement, which the government is actually having trouble dealing with because it's really a groundswell. So yeah, I think the people have taken command of the destiny of their cities, which is really important.
That's encouraging. I have young friends in China whose parents are party officials, powerful party officials, and yet my young friends are, say, 35 years old, have a couple children, 5 and 6, and they say to me, you know what, I'm going to move to California because I will not live in Beijing's air and raise my children in this air. So I have a feeling that message goes right up to Party Central. It says, if you want me to have grandchildren around this family, clean up the air.
Well, so, I can cite one example in which that kind of a phenomenon is affecting our thinking with regard to transportation and mobility. There is the data suggests that there is a clear preference now amongst the younger generation not to want to own cars. Everybody doesn't want to own a car. They're happy with the Uberization of transportation. So our entire planning for transport and mobility, say for instance in Delhi where my institute is actually preparing the next master plan for the year 2041, we are looking at transportation and mobility in a completely new paradigm. How do you look at providing transport as a service rather than transport as basically, making infrastructure and moving buses rather than moving people. So as I said, the learning curve has been so steep, and we have to make sure that our cities are good for the next generation. I mean, we like to make a big deal about our youth bulge and the demographic dividend, but if our cities are not able to provide the conducive environments for that demographic dividend to actually be capitalized, to be actually contribute overall their talent and their hard work, then our cities will fail as well as our demographic dividend will turn into a liability. So, I think governments at all levels in our country are apprised of this challenge, but it is a challenge.
So I see around the world what I'm going to call a race to quality and a race to attract talent. The Wall Street Journal ran a story recently talking about Chinese city mayors and how they're competing with each other to attract, train, and hold talent. And the view is that if you can do that, everything else begins to fall in place. You can create companies, you can build bigger companies, you can solve the problems of society, but you first need smart brains. And you especially need that now as we see this rise of machines, most likely displacing a good bit of what we would call manual labor. So talk about India's ability for its cities to compete for talent, especially in the context that the states in India are very powerful and cities are not so powerful. How is that being solved?
Well, I'd love to say it's being solved. I don't think it's being solved yet, but I think, again, the orientation has changed. Industry 4.0, of course, is a very important horizon, but most importantly is your key question, which is how are we going to harness that new talent that we have in our institutions of learning and make them productive for achieving this urban transformation, which is not only urban, but it's actually an economic transformation, because we have to move towards becoming a services and knowledge-based economy. I think what is likely to happen as we go forward, and we are making efforts to do this, is that one, we have to break the silo of human resource development out of the confines of a single ministry or a single department. States are also rising up to the fact that, you have to talk about urban development and human resource development in the same breath. At least we've started acknowledging that. Are we going to be able to catch up in the race to actually capture all the best talent? Because, there is still a sort of an outflow of Indian talent going outside of the country. It will only happen if we are able to, as I said earlier, make cities places where the younger generation, the younger talent, feel that they can contribute. It's no longer simply about migration anymore. There's an indigent population, natural growth of Delhi is like more than 1 million people every decade. There's an indigent population that needs to want to stay there. So creating a better environment, both environmentally as well as economically, is going to be key to our urban development agenda. But I'm glad to say that we've at least recognized this challenge, and we're looking at cities in an integrated way, more as social and economic entities, not just as physical. But we haven't as yet caught up on the race yet.
So you've heard in the earlier discussions a view that the American entrepreneurial marketplace is very much focused on the top 20% of income earners around the world. But there's a whole other opportunity, the other 80%, of which arguably Indian entrepreneurs may be better suited to solve. Yeah. Isn't it in India where someone invented the way you make eyeglasses at, $2.50 a prescription? Cost me $200 at the best to get eyeglasses in the US. So it seems to me one way to jumpstart urban innovation in India is to ask the question, what could we export to those places in the world that desperately need these solutions? Africa is high on my list. It seemed to me you double down on the opportunity, because you not only have the Indian cities to make better, but you could be consulting and advising at the price points and with the solutions that Africa could really use. Thoughts?
Well, interesting that you mention Africa as an example, because I would have also mentioned the United States. we have requests coming from the United States asking whether India has good solutions for decentralized sanitation, which is required in many American cities. I mean, Honolulu, for instance, is one of the cities that's interested in looking at Indian solutions so that they can take care of their sewage and solid waste management solutions. So, of course, Africa is the big sort of, the big continent we need to service with Indian talent, but not just Africa. I think the whole world will be able to benefit from solutions which are frugal innovations created in the Indian context. But for that, we need to create the right ecosystem where those innovations can actually be produced. In that regard, there are two things that we are doing. One, as I mentioned, to look at the city as an economic entity, you need to recognize that the city is ultimately not just a formal economy, which is about industries or big business. It's about SMEs. And the MSME sector is really going to form the focus of what we do in terms of infrastructure and services. And the other thing that we're doing, which is soon going to be launched, is launching a national urban innovation hub, where the quadruple helix of business and industry, government, new startups, and communities can collaborate to find solutions. So we're very apprised of this need, but as I keep saying, I think our efforts are ongoing, and we hope it actually pays off.
So I hope you keep taking your vitamins. So one last question. If you had one thing you could change, you had the magic wand, you could say, this has got to be different, what would you change in India?
I would change the mindset in our cities where people think that they cannot be part of the solution. They think that they might be either part of the problem or they want to leave. I think I would change that mindset and tell people to engage with their local context.
Thank you so much, Jagan. Thank you so much, Jerry, for this wonderful session.